And now, it's BoomerLife, lifestyle discussion designed to make your life more engaging, meaningful, and complete. Celebrating the baby boomer generation, this is BoomerLife on Aug14th2017.
Yes, this is BoomerLife on Aug14th2017. I'm Joanne Sutton, joined today by our friends from the Alzheimer's Society of British Columbia, and their CEO, Maria Howard, is in studio with us today. Thanks again, Maria, for being a part of this show.
Oh, thanks for having me, Joanne.
So let's recap a little bit. We'll go back to last month on BoomerLife. We connected with the Alzheimer's Society to talk about the impact of caregiving on the caregiver, how difficult and challenging that position is, and how caregivers can actually manage the stress to better take care of themselves. We heard firsthand from a caregiver on the island, Joanne Egan, and she talked about her experience caring for her husband who had dementia and the physical toll that she suffered until she was able to build better strategies for caring for herself. She ended up in the hospital, and I think we all shed a little bit of a tear listening to her story. This month, we're talking about driving and dementia, which is a bit of a hot button topic. It's often used as a measuring stick for independence. We'll talk to Lisa Jameson, who can offer up firsthand of her account because her father lived with dementia. We'll also speak to a researcher from the University of British Columbia, Dean Foti, Dr. Dean Foti. And Dean's done some very significant work looking at driving assessments for people with dementia. Then later in the show today, we'll meet Sue Sammy. She volunteers with the Society on its Climb for Alzheimer's Volunteer Committee. The Climb, it's coming up at the end of September. It's a great way that people can actually come out and show support for the thousands of British Columbians who are making the uphill journey of dementia. So at this time, I should remind you that if you have any questions at all about the Alzheimer's Society of British Columbia, or if you want access to their wealth of resources, please visit the website, AlzhiemerBC.org. So, Maria, maybe you could start us off today by telling our listeners a little bit more about the Alzheimer's Society of BC and its vision.
Absolutely. The Alzheimer's Society of BC's, ultimate vision would be a world without Alzheimer's or other dementias. But until that day, really our vision is a world that is seen as a dementia-friendly society. And a dementia-friendly society is a place where people who are living with dementia, whether they are the individuals who have the disease or their caregivers or care partners, feel safe, included. They feel a part of the community of which they are in and have the support that they need to continue to have the best quality of life they can. And we know that everybody comes to their dementia experience in very unique ways, regardless whether two people have Alzheimer's. It's still a very individual experience. And so it's really important for the Alzheimer's Society of BC to ensure that we support and advocate and educate people around the province to help those people who are impacted and, again, have the best quality of life that's possible for them.
So how do you get your message out to the community? What type of resources and programs do you offer for British Columbians?
There are many things we do. We have a program called First Link. The Alzheimer's Society BC is a provincial organization, so we have offices across the province, which people can go to and attend services such as support groups, as education series. We have exercise programs called Mind in Motion. First Link is a way that people can be referred to our society through their physicians or even themselves to begin to engage and get the information they know to make the decisions they need to do. We have a dementia helpline, which is, again, a provincial line. People are welcome to phone that and ask any question they have. And the questions range from, what is dementia to I'm going to see my doctor, I don't know what to say. We also run events, and it's really important for us to raise money. Our society is 85% fundraised, but really events are also critical to raise awareness and let people know that there are services out there to support them.
So we will be talking a little bit about fundraising today later on in the show, but specifically on today's topic of driving and dementia, that is our focus. How pivotal is this topic? Is this something that comes up in conversation a lot within the society?
Driving, like you mentioned, Joanne, is so critical, and especially in our North American world, driving is a sign of independence. It's a way most of us function. If you live in a rural community, driving is even more important. When you support families who are living with dementia and impacted dementia, they come to many milestones along the journey that involves having information and making some tough decisions. discussions, we always advocate that hopefully people can have those discussions and make those decisions as early as possible when it's not in a crisis mode. But sometimes that's hard, and sometimes people don't start the conversation soon enough. And so with driving, it's a little extra special in that way, because driving isn't just about the person who gets into the car. It suddenly is about your doctor and the motor vehicle branch and insurance. And so there's a lot of other things that happen that really sometimes pulls people into the conversation when they might not be ready for that. So it's a really important conversation to have.
Well, I think it also affects the entire community.
Absolutely.
Because there's a safety element involved as well.
Very much a safety element.
So maybe could you elaborate a little bit more about the goals of making Vancouver and British Columbia more dementia-friendly?
Certainly the goal to have a dementia-friendly society, which then we call a dementia-friendly community, is a community where people care and they understand that rather than do nothing, that reaching out and helping people who are touched by dementia is the right thing. And in fact, we often say before there can be a cure, there needs to be care. People need to care to actually start to make a difference. And so we work very closely with the municipalities in many different places across the province. City of Vancouver, City of New Westminster are two great examples to look at the way they set up policies, the way they look at the way they do the programs like the library or maybe their emergency services such as the police, to look through the way they help the community through the eyes of someone who might be living with dementia, and ensuring that that individual or that family who are touched by dementia have the support they need to fit their situation and still feel a part of the community.
Well, I know you've mentioned in the past some examples of just being aware in your community. Like if you're driving to work one day and you see an elderly gentleman or woman sitting at the bus stop, and then when you come back past that same area 4 or 5 hours later, they're still sitting there, you need to notice that. That could be an example of someone with dementia.
Exactly. I mean, it's asking people to sort of look around, and if someone doesn't seem to quite fit the picture that they see, what can they do? I'll just share a quick little story, which I think really touches on the topic today and what a dementia-friendly community is, as what the society is really encouraging people to think of. We work with a family who the father has dementia, and he all his life had been a long haul truck driver, and so driving and being out and his career took him all over the place. It's very important for him. In fact, it's how he defined himself. As he got older and he began to retire and participate less in his career, he still was attached to driving. He loved to drive. Unfortunately, as he got older, he did begin to have some issues and eventually was diagnosed with Alzheimer's and stayed at home for as long as he could, but eventually he had to move to care because it was just too difficult for his family to support him. But they wanted to do something to honor him. They wanted to think about a way that they could support him to still be who he was and have the people in his new community at the care home understand who he was. So the children of this individual went out and bought him the most skookum truck. It was fully loaded, 4-wheel drive, bright red, everything you can imagine. And they asked the care home if they could park that truck in front of the care home. And they, and then they promoted it as, Mr. Smith's truck. And now every time that someone took out Mr. Smith for a drive or a doctor's appointment or for an ice cream, whatever it would be, they drove him in his truck. And, if anybody asked, whose truck is parked in front of the care home, they would say, well, it's Mr. Smith. And it's such a wonderful way of a family who, in a situation could be so stressful and probably was as they were making those hard decisions for his license not to be, current, that they could continue to honor him and not take away a piece of who he was and still have him, have something that was important. And so I think that's a really great story for today, because driving is a hard conversation, but there are some amazing ways that families adjust and move through. And that's what we also want to recognize and say to people, the courage they show is, and the leadership they show is phenomenal.
Oh, Maria, that's just great. I'm so glad you shared that. I think we can all take away something from that story today. So keep that in mind, because planning ahead is really a huge part of being able to live well when on this dementia journey. And I'll remind our listeners once again that if you have any questions or concerns about dementia or Alzheimer's disease, you can always call the Society's First Link Dementia Helpline. It's free in the province, 1-800-936-6033, or please visit the website, AlzhiemerBC.org. This is Boomer Life, and Maria Howard is here, CEO of the Alzheimer's Society of British Columbia. Our next guest is going to help us with the controversial topic of driving and dementia on CL 650.
Celebrating the baby boomer lifestyle. This is Boomer Life on CL 650.